My name is Brian Pellrine. I am staff assistant to Alderman Brian Hopkins. We are here to talk tonight about a zoning change request for property at 1633 to 1649 North Halsted. It's the former Royal George Theater and the building immediately to its south. We have on the panel some presenters who are going to walk through the plans for that, and we will have time for some questions at the end as well. Please feel free to use the Q&A chat box at the bottom at any time, and we'll try to have a panelist type an answer to you, or if it warrants larger group discussion, we can put it out there for a panelist to answer verbally for everybody to hear. We'll also try to save some time at the end for live questions from folks who raise their hands at the end. With that, I turn it over to Alderman Hopkins for a brief introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I'm coming to you live from Clover Park, one of the jewels of the Second Ward. So if you hear a little background noise, that's what's going on there. I do want to start this meeting as I typically do when we have a development proposal to review, and that is to stress that no decision has been made. This is part of an open process where we try to evaluate the interests and concerns of the community with the need for our city to move forward and grow and promote economic development. Those two things are occasionally in short-term conflict, but they're always in long-term harmony. So it's just a challenge for all of us to find the sweet spot. And a site like this really highlights that. It's in a commercial corridor, but it's very much on the periphery, if not actively part of a residential neighborhood with the shared alley there for people who live in that community, know that quite well. Many of them are on this call tonight. So what we're looking to do is see if a development like this can actually take place without having an adverse impact on the immediate neighbors. This is a zoning change from a B32 to a B35. It would be a planned development. And as I said, no decision has been made. With one exception, it does seem to be pretty much a foregone conclusion at this point that the Royal George Theater's use as a theater is obsolete. They did try to originally market it to other theater companies, including Steppenwolf. People who know far more about that industry than I do say just basically the size of the room, the capacity, the configuration, all of that in a post-COVID era just make it undesirable to continue its use as a theater, which is unfortunate because I'm sure many people on the call like me enjoyed a number of shows there over the years, including the Lenny Bruce show, which was a pretty fitting end to a theater's life like that. But we'll miss that, but something is going to have to happen there. The question is what? It may be this proposal you're about to see tonight. It may not be. That's where the community review process comes in. This is an open forum and we want your ideas. We want to get your feedback so we can make an appropriate decision in the best interest of the community. As Brian said, we'll have the chat feature enabled, so put your thoughts and your comments during the course of this meeting, and time allowing at the end, we can unmute people if you want to use the raise a hand function to express your thoughts verbally. We can do that too. So with that, I will turn it over to counsel for the applicant, Rich Clowder from the law firm of DLA Piper. Rich, take it away.
Thank you very much, Alderman. Thank you, Brian P. And thank you all for your attendance this evening. As Alderman Hopkins mentioned, this proposal does relate to the property at 1649 North Halsted. I know all of you on the Zoom know it well. Just by way of introduction, with me tonight are Ed Pollack and Gordon Ziegenhagen. They are principals with Draper and Kramer, and their architects are on the phone or on the Zoom as well, Jeff Goulet and Martin Snow from SGW Architects. We very much appreciate the opportunity to receive community input on this project. We've met twice already with Lincoln Central Association. We've had numerous other meetings with other stakeholders as well. And in our minds, the design evolution responds to much of that feedback. And we've tried very hard to be good listeners and to follow established precedent in the neighborhood. This proposal aligns with the approved building to our immediate south. As with that project, the rezoning request here, as Alderman Hopkins mentioned, is to rezone to a B3-5 underlying zoning district and plan development approvals. We are virtually the same scale as that project, and architecturally, we have tried to draw inspiration from the Steppenwolf Theater design, among other buildings in the neighborhood. In some important ways, we believe that we are actually improving upon that previous and already approved project. For example, we intend to provide a minimum of 15% affordable units on site. We have also forged a partnership with the Steppenwolf, which you'll hear more about shortly. And with all of this in mind, I'd like to turn it over now to Gordon Ziegenhagen from Draper and Kramer, and he in turn will turn the presentation over to Jeff Goulet to walk you through the plan. After our presentation, as Alderman Hopkins mentioned, we look forward to receiving and responding to any questions you may have. And also along the way, if you do use the chat feature, we will try in real time to answer any questions that you might have that are sort of factual in nature. So without further ado, Gordon, please take it away. And I think, Martin, you're going to drive the presentation.
Brian, can you enable screen sharing for me, please?
Certainly. One moment. Okay.
Martin, we can see it.
Great.
Gordon, go ahead.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I think, Martin, you can go to the next slide or so. You know, I think Rich did introduce all of us today on the line. And you'll also note that we are intending to have the executive director from the Steppenwolf as part of this presentation tonight. I'm not clear that she's able to make it. As it turns out, Steppenwolf happens to have their annual board meeting, the first that they've been able to have in 2 years, right now. I mean, like literally right now. So maybe she'll surprise us, but maybe not. And if not, you'll see me do my best impersonation of Brooke, which will be difficult, as you can see. Anyway, why don't you go to the next slide, Martin? So, you know, this is a little bit just about Draper and Kramer, and really the most important thing, though, that I want to point out is, yeah, we've been around for a while, but I think for me and for most of us here at DNK, the thing that we're most proud of as a firm is that in an industry where real estate companies have traditionally been heavily dominated by white men, Draper and Kramer is really, and has been for decades, a very diverse company. And, you know, some of those statistics really bear this out. You know, while, you know, personally, while my family and I don't live in the immediate area, we do have, we live just a little ways down North Avenue. We still do have a very strong connection to the community here. Our church is St. Michael, just down the street. We've been there for over 25 years. I've been a volunteer there for about 20 years, and really am responsible for leading pretty much every renovation project that's been there at the church. So, you know, we care deeply about the neighborhood. The even closer to this site, this is, you know, Fan Company in the Jandorf Hall building is where I bought my wife's engagement ring 17 years ago about. So it's, you know, it holds both a great meaning for both our firm and for myself. You know, to that end, when we really first conceptualized this project, we really tried to put ourselves in your shoes. To let your concerns, your likely concerns, shape our project. And so we didn't think the neighborhood wanted a tall high-rise. We didn't even attempt to plan the largest number of units possible on the site. And really, we didn't press the envelope with our proposed building size. You know, Rich mentioned that we used established precedent as really being our guide. And so, you know, we've of course, you know, as we've met with the community groups and different stakeholders, we've made changes to our plans, but you know, some things that have remained the same as part of our plans is our commitment to affordable housing, our desire to continue to operate a best-in-class ultra luxury building in this neighborhood, and then also, you know, something that we're really proud of is this partnership that we've established with the Steppenwolf. You know, Steppenwolf, of course, is truly one of the institutions that define Chicago. And so we're really pleased to work with them. And so, you know, really with that, I want to turn this over to our architects to guide us through the presentation.
Thank you, Gordon. As mentioned earlier, I'm Jeff Goulette, principal with the architecture firm SGW Architecture and Design. Here we're looking at some recent Draper Kramer projects in Chicago. These are some of recent, in the bottom corner, you'll see the Wrigleyville Lofts, which Draper Kramer and SGW did together, which just opened a few months ago, very successful rental project. A lot of what our firm has done, as Draper Kramer has done over the years, has been urban infill here in Chicago particularly. These are some examples of recent projects by our firm that you may recognize from various spots, if not right in the neighborhood, fairly close by. Both ourselves and Draper Kramer have been very proud to win multiple awards for our work over the years. And we think that what we've been able to come up with together here is a project certainly of that similar quality. So if we go to the next slide, Martin, let's look at the site for a moment. This is the photographs of the existing site. You're probably all pretty familiar with it. One of the major impactful elements of the existing site that we're very pleased to be planning to have go away was the large parking garage and loading dock occupying a lot of the Halsted frontage and feeding a pretty large number of automobiles in a stacked parking garage there. So that's one element that's going to go away. You can also see here the alley scenes of the existing site, which also includes a fairly sizable loft building at the south corner of the site. With the next slide, please, then, Martin. So the building that we're proposing, as Gordon mentioned, inspired both by architectural precedent in the neighborhood, the scale of some of the existing and proposed new buildings to the south of us, a little bit inspired by some of the strong horizontal banding that one sees on Yondorf Hall, and also the modernist language that we see in the beautiful building that Steppenwolf Theater occupies and just renovated across the street from us. One of the major features of this facade is a curtain metaphor that we can see in the folds of the glass wall and in the sort of rippling effect of the slab edge covers on the front that brings a sort of modern treatment of bay windows to this facade, and also is a subtle allusion to the theater past of this site and the very vibrant theater community across the street. With our next slide, please, Martin. One of the, I think, exciting changes that was suggested by our interaction so far with the community organization is that in our earlier designs, the sides and rear of the building had been largely clad in more modernist materials, metal panel. We have changed that to a brick material, which we think is a much better fit for the neighborhood. Here we can see one of the treatments that we've given to this building as well is that we believe it's not just got one front on Halsted, but it really has two fronts, the second one being really almost as important as the first. This is the east facade with still illusion of the bay windows and the glass from the front, but much more proportional in its use of the brick to allude to some of the traditional construction materials that are found all around the neighborhood. And we're also very excited about treating this as a front, which is rather rare in Chicago buildings, that the alley side gets treated with as much care as the street side, but here it also gives a tremendous opportunity for the building to take advantage of the beautiful views to the east. Let's see what happened here, Martin. We need to go back to our presentation. Just a moment while we solve the technical difficulty. Did you lose your connectivity, Martin?
Sorry, I'm getting back up here now. 1 second.
Okay. Apologize for the slight technical difficulty here.
There we go. Is it back up?
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Martin. So as I was saying, we are very pleased that through our dialogue with the community, we changed up a lot of facade materials. We also reduced the mass at the top of the building, as you will see in some of the slides we run through next. Another feature of this building that we're very excited about is we have pulled the entire ground floor facade back from the sidewalk line a significant distance so as to be able to provide a very generous opportunity for sidewalk cafe treatment, enlivening of the street experience there. And so that's been a key driver of the design of the ground floor of our building. And we're very excited about the opportunity to improve the streetscape on Halsted in this location. Next slide, please. I'll go through these next ones pretty quickly. As you all know, our site is very close, only 463 feet to the North and Clybourne CTA station, which makes this building gives it a very significant opportunity to be a transit-oriented development. And that is the basis of our design in terms of its limited parking and the unit count and everything that comes with our project. Next slide. So this gives you an overview of both the ground floor of our building and the sort of surrounding area. You can see that at the north side, we have eliminated the huge curb cut, the loading dock, and all of those appurtenances that were specific to the theater. Our loading would come off the alley, although Draper Kramer has, in dialogue with the neighborhood group, has promised to limit strictly, and Gordon can perhaps speak to this a little more, the time of day that any of the loading or service of the building would be, any kind of truck service or anything would be happening, will be strictly limited. And then we have a relatively small garage at the back of the building. I think our count is about 35 cars. And then as I was mentioning a moment ago, much of our effort has been to devote the majority of the Halsted frontage to a retail/restaurant use, which we are excited about making very active and really contributing to the vibrance of the streetscape. Then the lobby and offices and other elements of our building are grouped at the northwest corner. Next slide, please. Gord, do you want to speak a little bit about the alley?
Sure, I think I'm unmuted there. All right,
There we
great.
go.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so a couple of things about the alley. Obviously right now it doesn't look too great, especially with the big traffic, the big dumpsters. And we have heard complaints from residents about the amount of traffic, in this alley. Some things that really do help us though, is that, as you can see, the buildings directly across the alley, the townhomes on Burling, they physically are not connected to the alley. All their garages load off Burling. That's a help. And then moreover, the approved building to the south of us has no parking. So those two things do mitigate some of the experienced traffic here. I think another big item to consider is that this parking garage had upwards of 130 or 140 parking spaces when the theater was open. So now with the reduction to only 30, 34, 35 parking spaces, really with consulting with our traffic engineer, this is really our amount of cars are really not going to add a noticeable impact on this alley. But there's one other thing that I want to point out in this photo, and it was something that kind of bugged us because we're history buffs and we love these old Chicago alleys. The brick alley is pretty cool, but it's got a lot of warts, so to speak. It's got some asphalt patches. You can see them pretty prominently in this photo. And so, one of the other things is we were thinking about, hey, what's something else that we could do really for the community here? This was something that came to mind. And so, what we offered to the Lincoln Central Association was to actually repair these damaged areas of the alley, and not just in front of our building, but all the way down the alley to Willow Street.
Thank you, Gordon. One keynote as well on the size of the alley. Many of you may be familiar with this, but it is a 20-foot alley, which is unusually wide for Chicago conditions. So that is also helpful. Next slide, please, Martin. So skip over this pretty quickly. We have 133 units ranging from studios to generous 3 bedrooms. You can see that in this plan, the sort of way that we've treated the idea of bays working with angled views along the street frontage and creating that glass curtain effect that I spoke about earlier. And then you can also see that the units which face east have a lot of glass and take advantage of the views in that direction as well. One other slightly unusual feature is that our building steps back very considerably along the east side as it moves to the south, so that we're 49 feet from the east property line to a significant proportion of our eastern wall along the along that east side, which we're pleased to be able to reduce the bulk of the building in that way. Next slide, please. In this, this is the so the plan we were just looking at was floors 2 through 7. This is the 8th floor plan, where the building sets back considerably at both sides, where it's providing terraces for the units. The red boxes that you see up towards the top are areas that the building in our earlier design occupied with its bulk, and which have been removed to reduce the bulk as it impacts the neighboring properties to the north and to the northeast. Next slide, please. And this is a penthouse level, which is quite small in scale, not able to be seen from any of the surrounding streets or the alley, and which also itself was reduced. The pink or red area you see at the top was formerly occupied by space, and we've carved that away to even further reduce the impact of this penthouse level. Some of the inspiration for the architecture you can see on this slide, Steppenwolf among them. And then going to the next slide, it shows our building in context with the approved building immediately to the south of us. It shows, of course, the very important Jandorf Hall structure with its strong horizontal banding further yet to the south. And then beyond that, the gray box that you see there is another building, which is a planned development, which is already approved for construction, which is just slightly to the east on North Avenue. This is a slide which has a lot of fairly complex information, but mostly what it says is that there are many buildings in the immediate area which are considerably taller than ours or around the same scale. And so that was also something, particularly those, as we've mentioned, immediately, that are already approved immediately to the south and slightly to the east, that sets the context for the height that we're seeking here. And this also, we can go quickly past these, but it shows the change. The upper renderings are the earlier versions of the building, and then the change to largely masonry cladding on the south, north, and east sides, and then the reduction of areas of bulk at the northeast corner are indicated in this slide. Next. Similarly, this slide shows some of those same changes with the older design on the top and the newer design on the bottom. The dark black line on the lower right-hand image is the outline of the approved building to the immediate south of us, which comes all the way to the alley with nearly its entire height. And that's an area where I was mentioning the plans earlier. We were pleased to be able to carve our building back pretty significantly along that eastern front and give a lot more breathing room between our building and the alley. These are some of the materials that we're proposing to use, which I think came across pretty clearly in the rendering with the glass and the brick elements and the slabbage covers that will be strongly expressed on the facade. Gordon, why don't you dig into this one?
Yeah, sure. So here's where I do my impersonation of Brooke, my very poor impersonation. But really, this this highlights some of the quotes from the support letter that that the Steppenwolf provided on our behalf, and really this was the result of the many months of discussions that we had with them. We went to them right at the same time that we started going to the community to really ask the same things, like, hey, what would you like to see on this site, and here's kind of what we were thinking, but but what do you think? And so they really embraced that, that we wanted to be so collaborative with them. They were big fans of having a residential building across the street. They felt it could really add to the vibrancy of that cultural corridor there. And then moreover, there were some very specific things that they wanted. One of those things was when they learned that our typical program calls for having a coffee shop, some sort of morning breakfast place in our buildings. They said, well, we've got one, and we've got one already here, and it's really nice. Would you consider foregoing that in your building and instead promoting our front bar? And we said, sure. That sounds great. I mean, if many of you have probably been there, it transforms into more of a bar, during and a dinner location in the evenings. But it's a great place, to grab a coffee and a bagel in the morning, and so we readily embraced that. The other thing that they really articulated as a need was the ability to house some of their visiting artists. And we thought that was a great idea, and arranged to make that happen as well. So the other kind of comments that that were brought out here. I mean, I'll just read one of these. Ours will be a symbiotic relationship reflective of the spirit that has made Chicago a great city in which to live and work. And I couldn't have written that any better. So anyway, we're very grateful for the Steppenwolf support. We're big fans of the Steppenwolf, and are really pleased to work with them on this project. And so, why don't I address this too? This is really our closing slide, and we've really listed a number of the real benefits of this project. We believe this is in excess of a $50 million investment that we would make here. Significant amount of construction and permanent jobs, as we're planning to likely have a restaurant tenant in that ground floor space. That's something else the Steppenwolf was really excited about, as it's something attractive to their guests as well. Certainly, there are local hiring opportunities, a lot of environmental and sustainable features on this building. The affordable housing that we already spoke about, 20 units, in fact, all on site. And then, as we noted before, the brick alley repairs. And then, finally, something else that I think has worked really well on some other projects is just having regular, timely construction updates to all of our neighbors, letting everyone sign up to get a weekly construction update, and sometimes more frequently if there's something that we think important to share. Because while we can't eliminate all inconvenience during a construction project, we can certainly plan for it and give you the information that you can plan for it. So if there's something really noisy going on at 10 a.m. on a Thursday, you'll know about it, and you can go to the library. you can make other plans, and so that's really what we like to do, and we think has worked really well. I've also put here, kind of a preliminary timeline. Should we be able to garner approval to move forward with this project, we would hope to start this winter, and really be completed by the following spring. So I think with that, we will turn it back over to Brian. Is that right?
Yeah, if you are complete with the presentation, we have a number of questions. We've answered some of them in the chat, but a number of them I think definitely warrant a verbal answer. So I'll start with the pre-submitted questions. Anybody who registered for this meeting was able to submit a question there. And let's see here. Okay, so the residential units. I don't know if this was mentioned. I know the answer to this, but I don't know if this was mentioned in the presentation. Are they condos or apartments? And secondary question to that is, are there any specific retail tenants that you expect to be able to get? And what does that look like in this current retail storefront climate?
Yeah, so definitely an apartment building. We're typically a multifamily rental operator, and that is what we see still strong demand for in the marketplace. And excuse me, as far as retail tenants, this seems like a natural place for a restaurant or two. Exactly what level of restaurant, whether from fine dining to casual, maybe all of the above. But we've already received some strong interest from groups like the Boca Restaurant Group down the street, and I'm certain that there are others. So I mean, everyone's it's right on. Retail environment is tough, but this is a really strong location for a restaurant.
All right, thank you. Are you able to share anything about the planned price point for the residential units?
We would expect these to be, around the top of the market for this area. I think that, a building that we look a lot to in terms of, what their units are renting for is North and Vine, down the street. So I think that, if you, check out what their offerings are, I would expect that our price points will be very similar.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up question to that. There is a question in the chat here. Will it be possible to combine 2 units? I would think not if they're rentals, right?
Yeah, I would expect not. Shockingly, we have actually done that on a project before. But we're not likely to do that here.
Yeah, not for rentals. Yeah, okay. Thank you. We do have a question, since you mentioned North and Vine, there is some concern. I've seen a couple comments here from folks about the empty storefronts in the North and Vine building, which has been up now for over a year. Obviously, you can't speak to what their strategy is, but what do you think it is that differentiates you guys in that retail space from the North and Vine building, given their close proximity and similar building type?
Yeah, I think it really has to do with that. This is a little bit of a restaurant row, here on Halsted. It's also across from a tremendous anchor in the Steppenwolf. I think that's why we're so high on the restaurant, use. If it weren't for those two things, I would agree that we'd be in the same tough retail environment that others would be. I just think that this particular location has some other drivers to it that other locations don't.
Right. There's been a few requests here. I don't think I saw it either in this slide deck for the east side rendering. So the back of the building.
Yeah, let's go to that.
If we could get that pulled up, that would be great. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. So hopefully, if anybody was missing that, that's the rear from the alley view. Thank you. There's a question here about, where did that one go? Apologies, there's a lot rolling in here. The interest is high. Let's see. Let's open up the big elephant in the room here. There are a lot of people concerned about parking. obviously, I think it would be good if you can speak to if TOD is proven in a location like this. With, I think it's 35 parking spaces or something like that, and 135 units plus the retail space. People are very concerned about parking, understandably so. It's a congested area. So, you know, anything that you can point to on that in that regard would certainly help some of the questions here.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, first off, you know, we through the community process, you know, to date, we've had, you know, folks you know, chime in that they thought we had, you know, too few parking spaces. We've had probably an equal number of folks say that we have too many parking spaces and wish we had fewer. I think what has, you know, what has borne out from our experience in developing apartments over the years is that there's been a continual decrease in demand for parking in these transit-oriented buildings. And so, you know, we like to strike a balance. It doesn't do us or anyone really any good to build empty parking spaces. Now, at the same time, you know, do I feel like, you know, we're going to have empty spaces here from 35? No, I don't. But what that means is that we're not going to be attractive to everyone. You know, someone that has a car, once our parking is sold out, they're probably not going to want to rent here, because not only would they not have a space to park here, but it is, as everyone has correctly noted, it's impossible to find a parking space in the community surrounding here. So it's not going to be a pleasant experience for a would-be renter to rent from us if they don't have a parking space. So, you know, I think the planning and development community over time has really embraced this notion of the best way to reduce the amount of cars is to actually reduce parking. I mean, it kind of, in some ways, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it really does work that way.
All right. On the parking note, this is a question for the alderman. There is concern that residents in this building who maybe didn't get a parking space would seek zone 143 parking. Alderman Hopkins, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, actually, that's become kind of a standard codicil that we add in TOD buildings, especially planned development language. You know, you can put a couple of paragraphs in there that basically prohibits that practice from occurring in perpetuity. So anyone associated with the address is not allowed to seek residential parking or buffer parking, for that matter, in the immediate zone. And that is something, if the community requests that and feels that's appropriate, I would certainly make that as a condition for any approval here.
Thank you, Alderman. Sorry, I muted myself there. There's a question here regarding one of the renderings. Let's see here. Actually, let's go to this one first. So there's a question here from Evelyn about private security that patrols the alley behind the building currently. Would it be possible during construction to keep that alley accessible for vehicles to get down? Or is that something that it's too early to tell, or just a promise that can't be made?
You know, I don't know for sure. I think generally we try to keep everything open. You know, that said, this is undoubtedly going to be a pretty tight site, but we really haven't researched that yet, you know, with a contractor of how to handle the site logistics. But I will tell you that our prejudice is towards keeping things open.
And if I can weigh in, Gordon, to the recent buildings of similar type that we've designed and been involved in, where the parking garage forms sort of a bustle at the back of a building like this, that is not built until last, so that the general contractor is able to use that area for most, if not all, of the staging. And therefore, we have also seen that the alley has generally been able to be kept open.
Thank you. I have a question here for the breakdown of studios versus 1 versus 2 versus 3 bedrooms.
I could take that one, Gordon.
Sure.
Yeah, so there are 12 studio apartments, which is 9% of the total, 25 traditional one beds, what we're calling, and then we have lofts, 68 loft style one bedrooms, which have the borrowed light bedrooms. We have 26 2-bedroom units, and we have 2 3-bedroom units.
And just to give everyone a sense of how that compares to a typical apartment building, these in general, this is tiering a little bit bigger, more 2 bedrooms. I mean, a lot of apartment buildings, especially if you've seen many recently, a lot don't have any 3-bedroom units. So, you know, we wanted to have a few. We wanted to trend a little bit larger, a little fewer studios than you might typically have in a what I'll call a traditional apartment building. And that also speaks to our focus on this being a true luxury product. So a little bit more gracious units than you would typically have in an apartment building of this size.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Will there be EV chargers in all or some of the parking spaces? Same for electric bicycles.
Definitely some. Who knows if gas prices stay at $7.50 a gallon for premium? Probably everyone's going to have an EV in 2 years, and we're going to need them in all those spaces. So yeah, we'll follow the market, but you know, we're already making sure that we have enough electrical capacity in these buildings that we could handle 100% EV chargers, you know, when the time comes.
Thank you. There was mention of units that will be used by the theater. Is there any more detail that can be shared on that?
You know, Steppenwolf is really, you know, still determining exactly how many they might need. It's probably going to fluctuate over time, you know, just based on, you know, how many out of town actors and staff people they have, and then, you know, what our availability is. So I expect that, you know, we'll enter into a kind of master lease agreement. But, you know, beyond, you know, an agreement, I think it's just important that, you know, we're really passionate about, you know, working with them the same way that they are, you know, with us. And so, you know, we're going to find a way to, you know, help them out in any way that we can.
All right. Will the building development and or rental use utilize environmentally friendly practices?
Yes, very much so. You know, if you've been following a lot of the city's guidance on these things, you know, we continue to raise the bar, and you know, the construction industry and certainly the design profession have really, and frankly, the products that have become more accessible price point wise, have really allowed a dramatic expansion in the amount of sustainable products that one can, you know, include in a building. And so we're big fans of it. Our last building was a LEED certified building. We believe this one will be, you know, even better than that. And so I guess that's a long way of saying yes.
A couple questions here about, I think this is specific to the Burling Street neighbors, concerns about noise from balconies on the rear of the building and loss of privacy in yards. Is there anything that you can say to address that?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, I think less than half of the units actually have balconies. And, you know, the reality, I don't know if any of you are proximate to a building that has balconies on it at the moment. But I always marvel at how how little people use their balconies. Even in these couple of months of good weather that we have, these balconies also aren't humongous, so they really can't accommodate large amounts of gatherings and so forth. So I'm not particularly concerned that there are that there's going to be a mass of people hanging out here. But moreover, it's maybe not too clear from even this rendering, but our decision to really site this building as far to the west as possible, keeps us, you can kind of see it on this where that dashed line is, really keeps us pretty far away from the actual townhomes, which themselves have no windows on the alley. And any windows that they have are kind of then perpendicular to ours. So I think that in a way, the townhomes are designed to be pretty private, and not to mention the awesome tree canopy that they have in these, which I'm not sure that our architects' pictures even do justice to what's actually out there. It's really impressive. Whatever all of you have done to keep your majestic trees growing, keep doing it.
The other thing we might mention, Gordon, is that those units which will be at the second level and which will have terraces at the roof of the garage, those will be relatively small terraces, and they will be held very far back from any ability to get over to the parapet wall on the east. So we're keeping that essentially intact. The one exception, perhaps Unit 16, but all the rest will be held significantly back.
All right, next question is for Alderman Hopkins. Concerning density creeping north along Halsted from, previously it's been largely south of North Avenue. So I guess the question is, what point on Halsted can we expect the building height to step down? Alderman? Right.
Yeah, hold on. I'm trying to unmute here.
There.
Actually, there's the mute button. Now I'm trying to unvideo. Hold on. Okay. The question is regarding density, and this is basically the slippery slope argument. My standard response to that is, we have to evaluate each project on its own merit, and not allow one project to be used to justify a poor zoning decision in the future. So, this is what's before us right now. It's certainly fair to put it in the larger context, but I can honestly say I don't think I've ever made a decision that I wasn't comfortable with in terms of granting additional density or allowing an upzone because of a previous project that was successful in convincing the community that it was a worthwhile project. So, that's it's not a direct answer to your question, but it's just my own personal philosophy with how I face decisions like this. There's enough here on the plate before us right now to really evaluate this based on the merits and based on the weaknesses. We're talking about some of them now. So the only thing I can do is assure you that I'll use the same due diligence and the same rigorous community review process for any future development that might be proposed for the Halsted corridor. I'm not specifically aware of any that are out there in the potential on deck circle. But I do understand that anytime you look at something that increases density, that's going to be on everybody's mind is, where does it end, right? So I don't have a crystal ball. All I can say is I think it's it's part of my job as alderman to evaluate each project on its own individual merits and let it either be approved or denied, based on what it brings to the community. Not on what may or may not happen, in the coming years in the same area.
Thank you,
And Brian,
Alderman.
could I say something else on that
By all
point
means.
too? You know, this is similar to a question that we received from a member of LCA, you know, who asked, well, hey, you know, is this going to cause then, you know, a big land rush, you know, to the north of us, you know, where there are a lot of, you know, 3 and 4 story, a lot of vintage buildings too. You know, is someone going to want to buy all these up and build taller buildings in their place? And you know, speaking from a developer's perspective, like, you know, there's a reason why those, you know, if that was the case, someone already would have done it. You know, all of those buildings that, you know, they're all cash flow. They're either cash flowing apartment buildings that are worth more with the buildings than just the land. And the same goes for those that are condo properties, right? The condo units are collectively worth more than just the land value. So it would take an exorbitant, way above market offer, and you'd have to, you know, talk about herding cats. You'd have to get, you know, several, if not a dozen different landowners to all sell their now exorbitantly priced property to someone. It wouldn't make any financial sense for someone to pursue, you know, that sort of land, you know, accumulation there. And so, you know, do I expect then that there's going to be, you know, future development, massive development to the north here? Absolutely not. I don't see it happening. It has the opportunity to happen here because this was all one contiguous parcel that was all part of the Royal George Theater, but we just don't have that. Everything else is in 25-foot increments going north of here.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about who these units are going to be marketed to. Obviously, there's a diverse range of sizes. Who do you expect will call this building home? Obviously, we talked a little bit about folks that work at Steppenwolf. You know, are we talking about families? Are we talking about young students? Are we, you know, I think a little bit more about the types of individuals that might be interested in this kind of building would be helpful.
You know, it's really interesting. You know, we have properties that are not too far from here in the Gold Coast, and you know what's great about them is that they attract, you know, pretty much everybody, you know, from retirees to you know, recent graduates that have you know, just moved to the city, and you know, so you know, our buildings tend to be a melting pot of folks, and I expect that this one will be the case too, especially given that we have a diversity of unit types from studios to 3 bedrooms.
How does the height compare to Steppenwolf itself? Do we know how tall Steppenwolf is?
Steppenwolf is 2 different heights. Martin, you may know how tall the front section is. I know that the fly tower at the back is 91 feet. I don't remember. Certainly the front section is considerably lower than that. I don't know if you have that number to hand, Martin.
Yeah, I don't have the number of the front portion at hand, just that the fly tower was 91 feet.
All right. Let's see if we can get that information. All right. When we talk about the affordable units, what level of affordable do we know that yet in terms of AMI?
Yeah, so these follow the city's Affordable Requirements Ordinance, or ARO, if you've heard of it. So those work out to 60% of AMI. Those numbers were just updated recently by the city. So someone else may have better information, but you know, they're viewable on the city's website. You know, if you just even type in ARO, you'll come up with information on what the rent levels are by you know, by individual or by families of, you know, 2 or 3 people. But you know, as recollection, that at the very lowest level, that might be a single person making somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000. You know, a two-person household that might be making 60-some thousand dollars, something along those lines. Really, targeting, it's really targeting kind of that missing middle, right? Where we have, there's subsidized housing for very low income folks. There's lots of luxury housing, but we have a hard time providing housing for people in those middle incomes, and the city's affordable requirements ordinance really tries to address that.
Thank you. There's a question here about what can be done to mitigate the reflection of sunlight off of the building's glass exterior.
It really depends on the glass that we select, and we are not typically inclined as architects to be big fans of extremely reflective glazing in that choice. So we prefer a glazing that instead, minimizes that impact on the surrounding structures.
Thank you. I apologize for those who have not had your questions answered yet. There are still many, so we're going to keep going here. If we do run out of time toward the end, we'll try to get those questions answered after the fact. And here's our question. Can this recording be shared? Yes, we will share that recording. We'll have it posted on the website sometime tomorrow, posted on aldermanhopkins.com. So that's an easy one. Let's see, what else? Will this be an all-electric building? Is there gas for cooking and heating?
To be determined, but increasingly things are going that way, to all electric. So I think we'd strongly consider that for this building.
With the exception of the restaurant space, which would probably need its own dedicated gas line for cooking. But aside from that, yeah.
All right, thank you. Get through here, trying to cover topics we have not already covered. For those of you who have given feedback in the chat, I may not be asking those questions out loud or typing an answer, but please do know that that feedback will be passed along to Alderman Hopkins. So question here, I think this is an interesting one. So is this density needed because of the purchase price of the land? And I don't know how able you are to talk about that publicly, but there's I think there's a valid question here as to, and this also ties into a number of the other questions too, about just going all the way from B32 to B35. What is I guess the hardship is how it's being described by some that requires this type of density? Was there an exorbitant purchase price of the land, or is there some other factor that you want to bring to the public's attention here about why the size that's being sought is being sought?
Yeah, Rich, do you want to address the question of hardship?
Yeah, sure. The request here is a rezoning and plan development approvals request. There isn't any feature of hardship that's required in connection with that request. The standards for rezoning are really appropriateness in relation to adjacent properties, trend of development, and other standards that appear in the zoning ordinance. So unlike somebody seeking a variation to, I don't know, for example, reduce a setback or something along those lines, hardship is not a factor in the evaluation under the zoning ordinance. And so I know that some people, when we met with, when we had a couple of the prior community meetings, did mention that they thought that there was a distinction that could be drawn between the proposal that we've made and the proposal that was approved by the city council the year before last for the site immediately to the south. insofar as that site is closer to the L than our site is. But their request, like ours, was not speaking in terms of a variation. It was speaking in terms of a rezoning request, and the criteria for the two are very different, and they should be applied appropriately here as they were applied appropriately there. There wasn't any requirement to demonstrate hardship on that project that was previously approved, and there isn't any requirement to prove up hardship on this project either. With respect to the purchase price, as Gordon mentioned, this was an assembled larger site. Draper and Kramer participated in a competitive process. They did not overpay for the land. They're not looking to build something here that's larger or out of scale because of their basis in the land. They paid fair market value for the land, and we just believe that the zoning request that we're making here is appropriate, especially insofar as it relates to other previously approved projects and the general scale in the neighborhood on either side of North Avenue.
You know, and I'd be happy to add something to that, you know, too. You know, imagine, you know, for a second, and this might actually pertain to some of you on this call. Imagine, you know, wanting to, you know, purchase property to build, you know, say your own home, and you want to build a 4-story home on, say, Burling Street. And, you know, you see, you know, future neighbors of yours purchase property, get approval for a 4-story home, and another person purchase more property and get approval for a 4-story home. And then you purchase property right next door to them. And I think probably expect that you're going to also get approval for a 4-story home. But then people say to you, well, no, I know we said they could build 4-story homes, but for you, we only want you to do 2 stories. I'm guessing that every single one of you would say, well, that's not fair. Yet there are, you know, folks on this line and that we've spoken with in the past that are asking us to do the exact same thing, to accept less than what our next door neighbors, you know, were granted.
All right, next question. Have there been any traffic congestion studies to analyze the impact to Halsted North and surrounding streets?
Yes, so we have engaged a traffic consultant here, and you know, really, and so yeah, we do have a traffic study that, you know, that we're happy to share. You know, with only 35 parking spaces, you know, this is not a major driver of traffic on either the arterial streets or the alley per their analysis.
All right, thank you. A lot of feedback, which, as I said, I will be sure to pass along. Just looking to see if there's any major topics we have not covered yet. Let's see. Here's a question. There are some neighbors, I think, concerned about their property values in relation to this project. Would somebody like to take that one?
Are they afraid their property values would go up? I mean, the current...
I think yeah, obviously that's not the concern, Gordon, but if you would answer that for those who are concerned that they'll go down, that would be helpful.
Yeah, you know, I don't see, you know, having an ultra luxury building, replacing what is right now a rotting theater, you know, is it doesn't seem plausible to me that you could, build a case for a reduced valuation.
Thank you. All right, there's a question here about WMBE reporting requirements. Actually, it looks like Rich is typing an answer to that right now, but if you want to answer that verbally, Rich, please feel free. And maybe explain what that is for those on the call who don't know.
Yeah, I was just typing out an answer. So the question is with respect to minority and women-owned businesses, and per the mayor's executive order, we are required to report on 3 occasions how we are doing as it relates to MBE and WBEs. The requirement is 26% and 6% respectively. Based on Draper and Kramer's incredible track record in this domain that Gordon referred to previously, I'm very confident that they will easily comply with that requirement.
Yeah, could you
Hope
just
that answers the question.
Yeah, could you real quickly, for those who might not know, mention what that is, what we mean by those acronyms?
Sure. My MBE is Minority Business Enterprise, and WB is Women Business Enterprise. And the requirement in the city of Chicago in connection with the zoning change is that you attempt to achieve compliance with a 26% and for MBEs and 6% for WBEs requirement as it relates to the costs of construction. So for a project that's $100, you would need to provide 26% of the work to be undertaken by MBEs and 6% minimum undertaken by WBEs. And that's something that I know Draper and Kramer is very mindful of and has a great track record in.
Thank you, Rich. Here is a very good question, a little bit about zoning technicalities. So I'll just read it verbatim because I think it is well written. Unclear if plan development designation was being requested. The answer to that is yes. But here's the rest of it. If yes, would a plan development designation allow for changes to building plans without further community review? And if so, what are those parameters? So I think the answer to that, and correct me if I'm wrong, would be no, because a type 1 zoning change with a plan development, any changes would need to go back before plan commission. So then it asks about maximum heights that are allowed versus what's shown in the presentation in feet. So maybe if somebody could talk a little bit about, and Rich, this is probably for you, what the maximum height allowed under B35 is, how type 1 zoning changes work, how plan commission works. Just a quick overview on that might be helpful to a lot of folks on the call.
I actually confess, and while I'm answering the question, maybe Martin can tell me what I know we've got it written down, but I don't have that screen open. I don't know what the current height requirement or maximum is. I can tell you though that generally speaking, when you get a plan development approved, which it requires a filing of an application, a referral to the plan committee, and notice of that filing goes out to all property owners within 250 feet, and Alderman Hopkins will post it on his website. And by the way, we have not yet filed an application. We have not been so authorized by the alderman. However, if we get to the point of filing an application, it's referred to the Chicago Plan Commission. There's a public hearing before the Chicago Plan Commission. It then proceeds to the Committee on Zoning and ultimately to the City Council for final approval. Because for a plan development, you are tied to specific plans, you cannot make material changes to those plans without amending the plan development, and an amendment requires you to go back to go through the same process that approved the original plan development. Notice, public hearing, approval by the City Council, etc. There are certain changes that can be made that are not material. For example, if you want to add a parking space, if you want to make a modest change in the materials, if you want to make a modification to the landscaping plan, those sorts of things can be done through what's called a minor change, which the zoning administrator can approve, but only if it's minor and not material. Something that changes something like height or scale or number of units or floor area, any of those things that could result in the building having a greater impact on the neighborhood cannot be done except through the amendment process. I hope that answers the question. And Martin, if I stalled long enough to get you to research the current height requirement or the current maximum height allowance?
Yeah, for lots with more than 100 feet of frontage, the baseline is 80 feet, but it specifically has a clause that says buildings that have more than 100 feet of frontage and are in a -5 and approved through a PD have no height limit.
Great. And then if you could remind everybody what the height of this building is.
Well, yeah, so measured to the main roof, it is, sorry, I lost this. We're 90 feet to the main roof level, and we have a penthouse that goes to 101, but that's that small portion that is not visible from the street.
All right, great. Still a few questions here, but it's 7:15 and we do want to wrap this up by 7:30. We said we would reserve some time for live questions. So at this point, I think we'll open up the floor to people who want to raise their hands and speak live.
Yeah, there's a couple of people I wanted to ask if they would speak. First, we have from the Lincoln Park Chamber of Commerce, Kim Schilf is with us. Kim, do you have a couple of remarks you could share? And then we also have Ann Moore on the call. I've had a couple of conversations with Ann and was wondering if she'd be willing to share some of her initial feedback. But Kim, if you're still on, would you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, bear with me just 1 second. I think I need to unmute each of these people. So unfortunately, I do not see Kim at the moment. I wonder if she had to drop, but I do see Ann, so we'll go ahead and go to Ann at this moment. All right, Ann, you should be able to, oh, I see Kim as well. Well, let's let Ann go first and then we'll have Kim come up next.
Okay. All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All of you, I chair the Lincoln Central Zoning Committee. I apologize, I have a cold. We have reviewed this proposal twice. We were the ones who suggested that the rear of the building be more attractive and more pleasant for residents who would live there and also for the residents on Burling. But mostly we're very concerned by the height and density of this building. The building to the south hugs the L. The developers can talk all they want about it, like not being fair, but the reason it is the height that it is because it is on the L. Lincoln Central and Ranch Triangle are very concerned about about Halsted Street. The zoning is B32 from North Avenue to Belmont Street. Every other developer has lived with it. So this idea that it's unfair that this development doesn't get the zoning relief that the property to the south, it's just outrageous. I just can't believe it. This is a small scale neighborhood. This building is too big.
Thank you, Ann. Alderman, would you like to go to Kim next? Or let's do that.
Yeah, if Kim is still on the call, Kim.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
Kim.
we got you.
Great. Yeah, on behalf of the Lincoln Park Chamber of Commerce, I'm actually here to share our support of the proposed development at 1649. The addition of the 133 new apartments, which include the 20 affordable units, I think will really provide some much needed density to the corridor. It's really important that we, again, increase foot traffic and create a larger pool of residents to spend money locally. The proposed ground floor restaurant with outdoor dining space, I think will really enliven the street and it will add more eyes, really promoting safety in the neighborhood. I know Draper and Kramer has engaged with local community stakeholders, and they've addressed some concerns. I know that they adjusted the design for the side and rear facades to include brick. They also reduced the building mass by multiple upper level setbacks. But really, again, from my perspective, from a business perspective and chamber perspective, we really believe the project will have a positive benefit to the community and will really help sustain Halsted Street as a thriving commercial district by attracting more people to the neighborhood to live, dine, and support all of our local businesses, which I think is so important right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Carlos, I see your hand from earlier. I know there was a few questions you had in the chat that I think we answered. Do you still have a question at this time? No, you know what? I need to allow you to talk to answer that. Go ahead, Carlos. Do we have Carlos? Okay. I will go to the next person, and we don't actually have any other hands at this moment. So maybe if there was a question in the chat that you didn't have answered that you'd like to have answered, we're going to give this another. Oh, Carlos, there we are. All right, Carlos.
I was muted. Okay.
Go ahead.
My question is regarding the parking spaces. That building with 135 units and only 30 some spaces is just not adequate. I live on Orchard Street, and during the day, it's impossible to find a parking space during the construction or due to anything else. So I end up getting tickets because I need to double park or I had to park near a fire hydrant. We have a problem with the development across the street, which is the Orchard, the Orchard Commons. They park on our side, and the alderman said that they're going to have, certain buildings cannot get a permit. That's not true, because you can go to the city hall and just get a permit parking for any kind whenever you're getting your new renewal for a city sticker.
Carlos, I'd like to address that real quick. In order for a residential address on a collector street like Halsted to get residential zone parking, the city clerk requires those residents to get a letter of exception from the alderman's office. And we have a number of larger TOD projects in the ward that we have built in, into the requirements that they're not allowed to get residential parking. This would be one of those situations potentially if that was what was decided. So we would not write any letters of exception for those individuals, and they would not be able to get zone 143 parking. This is something we have done before. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, and in addition to that, the city clerk now has the ability to cross-reference their database with the Secretary of State's database, so they can match the address that you're giving for where your vehicle is registered and where you're buying your city sticker. And if there's a conflict, it's flagged and it won't be allowed. So you can't claim that you actually live on a block that is allowed to have a residential parking zone designation on your sticker when you actually don't, and your plates would indicate that. So again, we have the ability to decline people trying to get a city sticker with the parking zone designation that they're not entitled to. And as was previously mentioned, that is something that we could do for this building.
But I'm talking about our neighborhood. I mean, that Halsted Street is a different story.
So you're talking about parking on Halsted.
Parking on Orchard Street.
Sure.
Commons are not supposed to be allowed to park on this side, and they're parking there. Everybody has a parking permit.
Yeah, parking on Halsted as opposed to the residential zone, I think is your point. So that point is well taken, and thank you for that feedback, Carlos.
Okay.
Okay, the next hand I see is Bernard Jacobs. Go ahead, Bernard.
Yes, I'm in favor of this project. I have lived and worked in the Old Town area and the near north side since 1974. I operate a business there. I own 2 pieces of real estate in Old Town. I've been dismayed by a lot of the more the higher buildings that are getting filled in on many of the streets around these neighborhoods. One doesn't need to look very far to the east on North Avenue and that big high-rise that was built, which is just way oversized. The retail space is awful. There's nothing nice about that at the ground floor. To me, this building is just a gorgeous infill building. It's at the same height. The architecture is sweet. I think it marries with the Steppenwolf very well, both in architecture and the fact that it's going to play off of people who use Steppenwolf, go to Steppenwolf, and the fact that Draper and Kramer actually thought far enough ahead to realize to accommodate a stronger retail space that they're actively going to look at rather than just putting up commercial space, which just become black holes. So I think this is addressing a lot of really nice issues on Halsted Street North. So I'm in favor of this project.
Thank you, Bernard. I do not see any other hands at this moment. Okay, there's one. Let's see, we have Max Brady. Max, go ahead.
Thank you, Brian. Actually just wanted to respond to the example Gordon gave earlier of, you buy a property, seeing what people around you can build, and then being disappointed that you find out you can't build the same thing. I would assume that when this property was bid for and sold, due diligence was done and it was realized that you had a certain zoning ordinance in place, and you could, set your valuation assuming that you can get that zoning changed. But I think it's unfair to say that because others around you have been able to build larger buildings, that you should have the same right to, even though you bought something that had a different zoning that didn't allow that. And to flip it the other way as well, I mean, if you consider the people who live on Burling and have bought properties near this site, they could look at it and say, well, we bought assuming that the zoning wouldn't change for this site, and knowing that something needs to go in, because at the end of the day, we are supportive of there being a project to replace a defunct theater, but we would like it to be within the zoning that's currently in place, and we don't. I think the struggle is understanding, well, why do we need to increase this zoning? Why can't we have something that fits within the current zoning that is there?
Thank you, Max. Great feedback.
Yes.
Okay, are there any other hands? We have just a few minutes left here. And of course, going forward, we will make sure that I'll be the main person you can speak with at Alderman Hopkins' office on this project. I see Evelyn just raised her hand. So let's go ahead and hear from her since we have a couple minutes. Go ahead, Evelyn.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I put this in the chat and I don't think the question was answered, so that's why I raised my hand. Is that an alley in between Halsted and Burling, or is that a street? It's called West Concord Place. And does that have any implications from a zoning or law standpoint?
Great question, Evelyn. So, and from what I'm looking at, I actually did see your question. I apologize, we didn't get it answered. The east-west portion that goes under the tracks, I believe, is technically West Concord Place, and then the north-south portion is an alley. I know that Google Maps has the whole thing labeled as West Concord Place, but I don't believe that to be accurate. I would have to do a little research on that to confirm, but let's see if any of the other panelists know that answer for sure.
I'd like to point out in the renderings, it even says West Concord Place in their drawings.
All right. Does anybody from Draper and Kramer want to speak to that, or the architect?
Yeah, I think that our architects, pulled that same information off existing maps. But it certainly, it sure looks like an alley to me. We treat it as an alley. I'm not aware of any special rights or funding sources that it might receive if it is somehow referred to as a street. But regardless of what it's named, I mean, we believe it to be an alley and treat it as an alley.
Evelyn, I'll confirm that, but I'm fairly certain that the north-south portion is technically an alley. I'm not even sure if there are any implications one way or another, but we'll get an answer on that for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it has any relevance. It sounds like semantics, really. But I mean, I was always told that prior to the L being constructed, that it was a street, which then kind of got stubbed off as an alley due to the L structure. But streets or alleys are public way, in either case. So I'm not really sure if changing the name or what we describe it would have any bearing on whether or not this project should get approval.
Right, we are at time. As I mentioned before, if you have any further questions about this project or feedback that you want to provide for Alderman Hopkins to see as he makes decisions about next steps or non-next steps, please feel free to reach out to the office. We'll post this recording on aldermanhopkins.com as well as the slide deck probably sometime tomorrow. And my name is Brian again, Brian Pellrine. I work at the office. And if you're looking to speak with somebody about this, please feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email. And the email address is on aldermanhopkins.com as well. It's ward02@cityofchicago.org. But thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks to our panelists for the presentation. Thank you to the neighborhood groups, Lincoln Central and Ranch Triangle. And we will be in touch as much as we can. Thanks everybody. Alderman Hopkins, anything to conclude?
Yeah, thanks everyone for your time and for your feedback. Appreciate it. Obviously we have more work to do on this one. Further review is definitely indicated here. So we'll stay engaged. If you have signed up for this meeting, we have your email address, and we'll keep you informed of any further developments as this community review process goes forward. All right. Thank you, everyone.